interesting talk in this session will be Buzz Aldrin, of course, and since we're running a little late, I think that's introduction is very short. I'll allow him to speak right away. Thank you.
We'll get to the details of details around here, but it looks like a collection of just about every variety of shape, angularity, granularity, but every variety of rock you could find. Because of what you have done, the heavens have become a part of man's world. For one priceless moment in all history of man, all the people on this earth are truly one. This is Houston. We have approximately 3 minutes until you must come out for EVA termination, and that's it.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and have this opportunity as chairman of the Board of the National Space Society and also as a crew member of Apollo 11. As we're approaching the 25th anniversary, series of rather hectic events will be taking place, and I encourage you all to participate as much as you can. I know I'm trying to do the most that I can do in the coming months and space week in particular. And that was a little bit of the past, just to set the stage for where we were in those marvelous days 25 years ago. And before getting to the present, I'd like to share with you a little bit of a vision for the future. And I'll have a few slides in the background, and hopefully I'll be able to see what's here and have some lights.
Push the advance.
I need more light than that. That's fine. Imagine you're in a classroom, in a lecture hall, in a city on a planet 25 light years from the Earth. The year is 2494. And the instructor has just identified the original world of the human race on a map. He identifies Sol, the sun around which the original planet Earth revolves. The instructor points to the third planet from the sun, Earth, a brilliant jewel of a world with a magnificent, yet no longer desolate single moon. Almost a twin planet system. The beauty of the world takes your breath away. You and the rest of the class have, of course, seen many pictures of the Earth, but you never fail to feel a sense of awe and deep reverence whenever you look at them. After a moment of silence, the instructor speaks to the class. It was only 5 centuries ago that humanity first stepped off the planet Earth and onto another world. That world was the Earth's only moon. And looking back, the step seems to be a small one. Only 400,000 plus kilometers, just a little over what light travels in 1 second. But remember, until that time, humanity was not able to leave that world. It didn't have the knowledge or the means. That moment was the most important moment in our history. The time when it became possible to explore beyond the surface of a single planet. To realize our destiny of sending life to cold and empty worlds. What a time it must have been to be alive. What I wouldn't give to have been there on Earth at that time. Just think of the adventure, the vision, the sense of destiny that must surely have existed. What was it like to have been alive when humanity first set foot on another world? To explore briefly and then after a pause, to venture outward again in the universe. These are the feelings and thoughts that countless future generations will have as they think back on the second half of the 20th century and wonder how it felt to live during that special moment in history when humanity first took that step off Mother Earth and onto another world. As Mecca is to the Muslim and Jerusalem is to many Christians and Jews, so the earth may become to future generations the place from which we sprang, the holiest of holy origins, or the Genesis. You're here at that very moment in history, and this is just the beginning. Now let's get a little more practical and deal with the present. 1994. I have a series of slides, and I may want to move them back, and I may want to also, I'm sure I'm going to flash a number of view graphs in front of you and make some kind of offhanded comments while I'm doing this. You, I'm sure over the years have come to appreciate that I don't always hew to the party line, whatever that happens to be. If I make some observations that may irritate a few people in their corporate interests, so be it. It's not personal. It's not intent. I'm just kind of relaying and calling things maybe the way I see them at the moment, and I reserve the right to change my mind. I think actually I may be able to do some of this. You've seen, I'm sure, this picture sequence of several different pictures taken by, assembled by Roger Resmeyer. Really a wonderful sequence of shots. Now, shortly after Apollo and our around-the-world activities, I had the opportunity to participate very briefly in some of the early studies on what was going to be the next big hope for the future. We had two programs that in the early 70s we wanted to have come about. One is a destination in space, another is an economical way to get there. A space shuttle and a space station. The nation, Congress, said, well, that's two. We usually only approve them one at a time, so which one do you want? So, in our wisdom, we selected the shuttle and tried to find what that was. And without going into a lot of details, one of my big regrets is that I wasn't a bit more assertive about then the Phase A studies of a two-stage, fully reusable shuttle system. Each stage burned sequentially, and each one at the end peeled off, came back and landed horizontally. But vested interests, and the center of NASA was jealous of another center that had astronauts, and their job was to produce the booster, and they wanted astronauts in their booster. And of course, different companies bid on this, and so that when they were asked to make studies, should we have a man in the booster, manned versus unmanned booster, you know what the answer was. They wanted a cockpit. Well, now this two-stage, fully reusable system ended up costing too much. So we had to pare it back. And the system that we came up with evolved into the system. Marvel of technology, marvel of achievement, but it did not live up to the promise, and it hasn't. And it's with us now, and it's made 60-some flights, and we're going to have it for a good while because it's our only system. But we've had to live with the fact that we expected somehow a bit more after the Apollo program and the Skylab and Apollo Soyuz. Then in 1984, we finally got a commitment from the administration for a space station. Well, it's 1994, and we don't have one. I can't say that our hopes have been really satisfied. National Aerospace Plane, the Orient Express. Can't say that our hopes have actually been satisfied. I'm not sure we can stand another not quite living up to expectations. Over the past 10, 15, 20 years, we've seen that when government gets to operate something, it begins to add to whatever it is. And it begins to not quite function as speedily, even though we now have a model of faster, cheaper, better. There are plenty of advocates of this particular system. Our technical advisor of this institution has written a few papers questioning whether we really are ready to do single-stage orbit. There's no doubt, those of you who have read Mike Griffin's paper, I would suggest that if you haven't, you should. The name of the game for the future for the economy is going to be progressive reusability and a fleet size that enables a flight rate and a fleet size that enables frequency of flights so that we can cross that line where reusability really begins to pay off. But let's not confuse reusability with how many stages it takes to get there. This is another way of getting into orbit, a promise for the future. It has some high technology parts to it, the thermal protection system and certainly the engine system. This is the Skunk Works approach, a slightly different corporate approach than maybe SDI has inspired in the Delta Clipper system. No doubt that that's a very sound concept and a very good configuration and grouping of the components. Now NASA says, well, that looks pretty good. Let me see what I can come up with. And this is the next 2000. 2000? Maybe 2020. An estimate might be 16, 17 billion just for the R&D, and then to acquire a fleet of 6, another 18, 19 billion. When might we get a start on something like this? I don't think immediately. I don't see the windows for the tourists in there either. Now, let's look at another system that may take us back 20 years or more. What was that system? 2-stage, fully reusable horizontal landing. There are a lot of ways of implementing things like this, and a number of studies in the smaller range of delivering payloads to orbit. I, without going into a lot of detail, followed and tracked some of the opportunities that could come out of air launch, fully reusable first stage, highly reliable first stage. And there are a number of other opportunities that are coming along. This is a drawing of what is in progress and has been studied by Johnson Spacecraft Center. Liquid flyback booster, reusable. I might call it a multi-purpose reusable booster, NPRB. Maybe there's something a bit more catchy than that, but it certainly is not going to go anywhere unless it's multi-purpose, multi-applications, maybe different size versions of it, and it has growth, and I think growth that we can see satisfying some of the objectives that we may like to see happen and come about in an affordable way. Here's a drawing of what a version of that might look like landing on the runway. Obviously, you're going to test something like this in a horizontal mode without the rockets in it, without any fluid in it. You're going to take it off and fly it around, and then next time maybe retract the landing gear and put it back down again. Do this thing in a progressive way, the way we test airplanes. And I'll get back a little bit later as to what we might do with some of the flight test versions of this that occurred to me just the other day. Now, these are the different applications that could be done for the full-size version of this. Obviously, we could have it augment the shuttle system and greatly increase the performance and the ability to go to 51 degrees to support a space station. A robust system. We don't want to shade performance. We don't want to skimp on performance because we want this to be really rugged, to be able to put the wings and the landing gear on it, and to have something that's operational and can have changes and upgrades to it. It has applications as an inline single first stage booster to take over the Atlas class payloads, Titan class, and then more than that. And then when you put 4 of these around the core stage, probably have the same size as an external tank. And like the Russian Energia, we put engines on the bottom of the core stage, work out some way that eventually we'll be able to recover the engine portion of this. And we're back in business to begin to do some exploration. But we do this in an incremental way, in an affordable way. When should we have started doing this? 1986, after the Challenger accident. Is it too late now? Hope not. If we wait much longer, then it's questionable whether this kind of a stage that is fully reusable, that can do such a wonderful job standing by itself, has an application for the shuttle. If it does have an application for the shuttle, it's of a nice size, it's robust, and as a standalone, it could have another fully reusable second stage. It might look like a very rugged version of that Lockheed Skunk Works. It's designed for horizontal landing. But we do this in an incremental way. Let me see what that's like. This is a flow diagram. It's probably a little hard to see in the back. I think I have another one like that. But as you begin to develop this system, it has several different branch points. And there's another flow diagram that I have a little bit later that shows a phase one, let's say a half-scale version or a smaller than half-scale version, and it has some interesting applications. Let me maybe keep that in the background, and we can turn that off and turn this system on and start going through a few of these charts. And we may or may not have time during the session for questions. As I go through this rather quickly, I do want to take about 6-7 minutes at the end and share with you a reflective statement that I'm putting together, modifying and updating, that is applicable to the 25th anniversary, and hopefully the other members of my crew may see fit to join in in supporting it or come up with their own version of modifying it so that we can have a joint statement that reflects our feelings and our sense. I'll close with that. Now, this is Popular Science 1990, 1991. You can see the Russians have been thinking about reusability in the Inertia system. This is about the half of the size of what our boosters might end up being. The flyback boosters that are shown here deploying wings in a similar fashion to what you'll see a little later on. I'm sure it inspired it, but they're essentially a Zenit rocket, and I'm sure a progressive improvement that Zenit rocket could also be made a fully reusable first stage. Now, there's a paper presented, you're going to have to put that over. There was a paper presented about a year ago by Max Faget and Glenn Smith, and it was a culmination of a good bit of research, and I think inspired at JSC an effort to try and look into an improvement in the shuttle system, in reliability and performance, and the version of this is a little bit different from what you'll see later on, and I think there are ways of removing some of the interference that you could see could come up in the airflow and also down in the bottom corner between the wings of the shuttle and the wings of the booster. Next. I tried to put these in the fashion so that you just slide them over. All right, we've seen that. Next. Now, these are different configurations that were looked at. And the one in the upper right-hand corner is the option that was judged to be more favorable at this point in the study. I think certain options of the folded wing in the bottom left-hand corner, where if you have two F-18 type tails, and they're attached, and their plan form shape is such that it's not too far from what the wing is, the wing can have a cylinder that's along the longitudinal axis, and it can fold down like this and fold back up again for a launch. And the engine can be in the middle in between. And most of these will probably have a canard on the front for control. Next. To minimize the interference with the orbiter system and the requirements for additional wind tunnel testing, this kind of an attachment point was selected. At the stage of the study that this was done, the option could have been two F1 engines in each booster. Instead, what was selected here was a more up-to-date engine that Pratt & Whitney has a license on to build and distribute. It's the RD-170 Russian engine, consisting of 4 bell nozzles for each engine. And there's another version of that, the RD-180, that has 2 bell exhaust for each engine, and that is the current preferred mode by the study, which would have 4 RD-180s. What you get out of this is you can have 1 complete engine failure on liftoff and still complete the mission. You couldn't do that with 1 failure of a full RD-170. This is a planned view of how the wing deploys after separation and in preparation for initial reentry. A canard would also deploy in the opposite direction up above. Next view. And this is a side view, or a vertical view, depending on how you look at it. And you see how the wings are one on top of the other, and they're scissored forward in that shape. And the landing gear attach points. Next. One wing is above the other in a staggered form. Next. And you don't see very much new on this other than most of the assembly procedures would be similar, and you put on the transporter and part it out. Next. These look a lot better in color. There you get a side view of the booster. Next. And this is a view during launch where you see the all engines burning and the nose cone on the jet engine that's used. Next. And here it's right after separation before the wings are deployed. Next. Now, some of the reasons that prompt going in this direction for the shuttle that have been assembled by different people to support this study. Note where the uncertainty contribution of the shuttle risk of catastrophic failure comes from and what we're trying to improve. If you have significant overthrust capability on the booster, you can begin to eliminate some of the abort modes, and you can reduce the engine thrust from 104% back to 100% or whatever. And you'll get arguments from NASA. NASA says 104% is safer than 100%. And there are arguments that make some sense that support that. I'm not sure that I really buy that. I'm not that happy to see that to launch some of the station payloads, we're going to have to go to 106%, and maybe even higher. When the SSME contributes that much to our uncertainty for catastrophic failure. Next. Let's look at reliability of what we're trying to move toward, and why I was quite tempted to look very seriously at air launch as a first stage for very valuable cargo, and this the maximum size air launch we could possibly have. We're a lot safer in scheduled airlines than we are in Volkswagen. We'd like to really get up to about the reliability of tactical fighters. Next. And where are we spending our money? The system operating cost. That's where we'd like to make some significant improvements. This is not a nirvana. It's not going to make the shuttle really cheap to operate, unless we can begin to make some other improvements in the operating support of the shuttle. But it does use the first stage incremental vehicle that then can be used in a standalone way. It's fully reusable, where much more savings can come in when you're talking about the 70–80% of the cost. It's in the first stage of the vehicle. Next. I'll won't read these, I'll just let you kind of glance at some of the reasons, maybe not in the same order that I would put them in. Next. Now, we really are going to take a different approach than the highly sensitive, trying to squeeze all the performance out of a system and reduce its weight down to the minimum that we're forced into doing by the rocket equation and by the gravity of the Earth when we start talking about reusability and one-staged orbit. We're going in the other direction. We're going to ruggedness and forgiving systems, ample margins in what we're doing, and a thorough flight test program in its horizontal modes and vertical modes. Next. Maybe the diesel versus the supercharged Porsche might be an accurate analogy, and there will be a lot of arguments with this. Next. The bottom box is the important one. It should not be designed to be marginal. It should be designed to be as big as practical. And if we need to develop an earlier version as a first phase, it hopefully could be done in parallel with the development of the full-size version. So we don't have to delay the application of the full system, which is really the one that's going to get human spaceflight into a more economical path. By augmenting our shuttle system, letting us survive with it, and use a component of that in the shuttle system while we're developing the next generation, which also uses the same component as the first stage. Next. This is the tree of development. We're a little short of time, so I don't want to go into the different portions of this, other than to, if you slide that over a little bit to the left. Right in the center, you can put, with a side mount payload, you can put cheap, expendable Castor 120s, and however number you need to get to orbit. You can put a Titan stage with a core stage, Centaur stages, existing stages, while we're developing the fully reusable next generation second stage. Next. These are the one-page conclusion recommendations of the growth and follow-on study of applications. So it's not just looking at the applications for the shuttle system. Next. Now, something occurred to me, sort of, why didn't I think of this before? While I was listening to Rand Simberg yesterday, and he was talking about the Russian space agency's use in zero-gravity airplanes. NASA doesn't quite see fit to allow us to do that with the airplane we have for zero gravity. But then we started talking about suborbital flights, and I started thinking about the versions of this that are needed for the flight test phase and the operational phase. We have a flight test phase that's a non-rocket aero flight test in a smaller version of this. And then we test a launch and recovery, a vertical one, and then we move on to the applications. Now, what would happen if we put the heat shield and everything on a non-rocket aero flight test phase and mated those two together and put a bunch of seats in? Well, we now have a suborbital tourism application. And that may be what begins to get things going, and that's going to happen a whole lot sooner if we move in this particular path. That one really excites me, if you understand what it is I'm suggesting. Is that the last one? we'll defer questions to maybe some later time. Maybe you can, let's see, we still get an inspiring slide on there. Lights up just a little bit. On July 20th, 1969, we three had the great good fortune to be the first emissaries from Earth to set foot on another world. We were privileged at that moment to be the eyes and hands for all humanity. A species with the audacity to dig a hole in the ground, recombine the minerals, and fly to the moon. Just as those who first captured fire felt no purpose but pure fascination, their progeny have relentlessly breached the barriers in pursuit of wonder. The lookout on Pinta, spying a hint of white sand cliff in the moonlight. Amundsen, on a bleak wind-swept plain of ice, reaching the pole with his few surviving dogs. Or Apollo 8, floating that silent Christmas Eve over the mountains of the moon. And just as light had once ventured from the sea, the children of 400 million years of land creatures on this planet watched Apollo 11 beat man's boat on the sands of another world. For one crowning moment, we were creatures in a cosmic ocean. A moment which may be seen 1,000 years hence as the signature of our century. Yet an eerie apathy now seems to afflict the very generations who witnessed that event. The past quarter century has seen not only a withered capacity for wonder, but a growing failure of nerve, a collective hypochondria that often retreats to dreams of a risk-free society. The youth, said Thoreau, gets together his materials to build a bridge to the moon, and at length the middle-aged man concludes to build a woodshed with them. A world without awe diminishes and trivializes all that it touches. Ironically, the view of the whole Earth from space has confirmed for many the notion that man should tend his own house, rescue his own garden, tend his own garden, rescue his own house, and make his pilgrimage not to the stars, but to the far edge of suffering humanity. We have a tendency to see outer and inner space like matter and spirit, or pride and humility, as mutually exclusive. But the reality is the razor's edge, the paradox of the two in tension. We are such polar tensions, like the note in a vibrato, or the rhythms and cycles that define all things. The whole person must have the humility to nurture the earth and the pride to go to Mars. For neither goal is finite, and either alone is the sound of one hand clapping. In another quarter century, by the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, most of its participants will have passed into history. We take this occasion, therefore, to urge a renewed commitment to the continued exploration of the solar system, a challenge that can bind together nations, inspire the young, advance science, and ultimately end our confinement to one vulnerable world. Beyond these ends, the space program stands with the cathedrals and pyramids among the great central projects of history, epic social feats that embody the spirit of an age, religious quests in the broadest and deepest sense. They are the taproots of human being. They are the dreams of the child in man, arising like all final concerns less from the ethic of work than from the spirit of play. We will walk on Mars, not for reasons practical or political, but in the spirit of wonder that sets our species apart.